When I opened my laptop to get all the birthday love from my Facebook friends, I noticed that my account wasn't the one on the screen. It was Amy's. And like every red-blooded male, I decided to do some snooping around, and what I saw made me absolutely sick to my stomach. It made me wish I'd never looked. Back in the fall of 2008, I enrolled in paralegal school at a small community college in North Carolina. I was looking for direction in my life and had always been intrigued by the law. And because at the time I had neither the money nor the discipline to go to law school, I did what I thought was the next best alternative. One of the unexpected perks of being at a community college in a female-dominated field was the guy-to-girl ratio. That semester, I was just one of 4 men enrolled in the paralegal program. There were just over 60 women enrolled, which meant that for every one guy, there were over 15 girls. And what's more is that the vast majority of our female classmates were in their early 20s. A lot of them had just graduated from high school. And because of this, that first semester was one to remember. Even though this was a small community college, there were still plenty of off-campus parties on weekends, and those parties facilitated a lot of hookups. As much fun as it was hooking up with our female classmates, it did lead to a lot of unnecessary drama. And as you can probably imagine, things could get pretty messy between classmates. I may or may not have been involved in some of these myself. If I'm being honest, it was almost like being in high school all over again. But I digress. So the second semester rolls around and my first class is Civil Lit. After I took my seat, I caught the eye of a pretty girl who walked in and took her seat right in front of me. She had dirty blonde hair and blue eyes. She was wearing these super tight jeans and a shirt she had obviously cut to make sure everyone saw her navel piercing. This girl was what I would describe as nasty hot. Pretty enough to catch your eye, but dresses in such a way that says she gets around. Now, I was only 31 at the time and didn't have much experience with women. I had only been divorced for over a year, and because I didn't get raked over the coals, I was still as naive about women as I ever was. So I had no idea at the time that she was the type of girl I should have steered clear of. Her name was Amy, and she was the most beautiful disaster I had ever laid my eyes on. Her deep southern twang and her friendly legs were more than enough to draw me in. Well, it appeared that the feeling was mutual, because we started flirting with each other right away and did so on a regular basis. In my mind, it was only a matter of time before we hooked up. At the end of the week, our instructor gave us a pop quiz on the week's lessons, and the test was old school SAT style. You know, the ones where you have to fill in the bubbles? Well, I didn't have a pencil, so I tapped Blondie's shoulder and said, "Hey, you got a pencil I can borrow?" She said,
"Sure, make sure you give it back."
"I can't make any promises," I replied flirtatiously. She said,
"Well, if you do, I'll hold you to it."
Equally flirtatiously. I was absolutely smitten by this girl. For the first time in my life, it appeared that a girl liked me as much as I liked her. Not only that, she was easily the prettiest girl that had ever taken interest in me. I almost couldn't believe my luck. Looking back, I realized that she was probably around a 7, but my inexperience at the time probably had her rated at about a 9. So I aced the quiz, and when Amy asked for her pencil back, I said, "Nobody uses this but me. Got it?"
"Got it,"
she says. I remember getting an adrenaline rush when she said this to me because she looked me right in the eye when she said it. And this wasn't just the type of look that said she was just acknowledging me. She looked at me like she liked me. A lot. So she says,
"From now on, we are going to call this the magic pencil, and I won't let anyone use it except for you."
So I said,
"Good girl."
Then she blushed, smiled, then whipped her head around. I honestly felt like I was back in high school. I hadn't felt this way since I was a teenager. It's hard to describe, but it was intoxicating. Well, as predicted, Amy and I dove headfirst into a serious relationship. Things moved very quickly, but neither one of us seemed to think it was fast enough. Hell, we told each other "I love you" less than a week later. We spent every waking moment together. And I mean that in the most literal sense. We were together all day and every single night. We would study during the evening, cook together, watch movies, we'd fall asleep on the couch together, and when we were in bed, we'd hold hands until we fell asleep. I mean, we did all that sappy stuff people do when they are stupidly in love. We even bought matching charms to wear around our necks. Mine was the letter A for Amy, and hers was the letter D for Donovan. I mean, we were inseparable. Amy also took great care of me. She would have my coffee waiting for me if I was running late to class. She would take notes for me if I had a migraine and wasn't feeling so hot. I mean, she moved heaven and earth to make sure I was okay. I remember this one time. I had mentioned to her offhandedly that I had forgotten to bring my lunch. I didn't really think anything of it because I figured I'd just eat a late lunch after school. Well, halfway through my legal research class, I get a text from Amy to come downstairs. And when I got there, she had a Whopper and Coke waiting for me and would not let me go back to class until I ate. I mean, I was absolutely enchanted by this girl. I had never dated a girl this pretty, who treated me this well, who loved me this much. I was head over heels for her. So near the end of the spring semester, Amy and I took a trip to the beach for her 20th birthday, and it was one of the most memorable weekends of my life. It was the weekend that we started entertaining thoughts of marriage and children. We were going to have 2 boys and 2 girls, and they all had names. We were going to live in San Diego, California, buy a house on the beach, and live out our days raising our children and being in love. My birthday was just a few months later, and when I opened my laptop to get all the birthday love from my Facebook friends, I noticed that my account wasn't the one on the screen. It was Amy's. And like every red-blooded male, I decided to do some snooping around, and what I saw made me absolutely sick to my stomach. It made me wish I'd never looked. Before I tell you how that fateful day changed everything, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video with anyone who calls himself a man. I would also like to remind you that if you want access to tens of thousands of hours of exclusive content not found anywhere, go to patreon.com/DonovanSharpe. There you will get access to audio and video versions of just about every episode I have ever done from the very beginning. You will also get access to my weekly Zoom calls where I do consultations, coaching, and give advice. Join our community of over 1,500 men who strive to dominate life at patreon.com/DonovanSharpe. Link in description. Okay, let's go back to my 32nd birthday, shall we? So I took screen grabs of what I saw, put it on a flash drive, and drove over to Amy's place. I sat directly in front of her and said as carefully as I could, "Amy, you know I love you, but I'm going to ask you something and you are going to tell me the truth." She looked at me in stunned silence and slowly nodded. I gathered my thoughts and said, "Have you cheated on me?" Now, I expected her to completely deny everything. In fact, that's what I wanted her to do. Whatever crazy explanation she was going to give me, I was going to totally believe it and blindly put what I saw on Facebook behind me. But that's not what happened. After what seemed like an eternity, Amy said,
Honestly, yes.
Guys, I cannot describe to you the gravity of the shock and pain I felt at that very moment. To this day, I have never felt that kind of emotional pain. I still get a slight pang in my stomach just talking about it right now. After her revelation, I cried my eyes out, in front of her no less. And of course, so does she. She reached out to me to tell me she was sorry, but I pulled away and told her not to touch me. I got up, ran into the bathroom, and puked my guts out. Then I cried some more. I probably puked 1 or 2 more times, I don't remember, but it was all a blur. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, I yanked off my necklace with the letter A charm and threw it on her couch. Amy cried and pleaded with me not to leave, but I just couldn't deal with what I had just heard. That day at work, I could barely focus. My boss seemed to know something was up because he kept his distance and didn't really ask me anything. But all day long, Amy was calling and texting nonstop telling me she was sorry, that she'd never do it again, that she loved me, that it was a mistake, and that she wanted to make it up to me, all of the rest of that. It was extremely difficult not to respond because even though I was extremely hurt, I still loved her very much. Those feelings don't just disappear when you learn you've been wronged by someone you love. This is why I always try to be reasonable with men who reach out to me with revelations of infidelity in their relationships. It's easy for someone who is detached from the situation to say, "Just leave her, bro." But when I get that email or that message asking me how to deal with a cheating girlfriend or wife, I always think back to the very moment where Amy told me she cheated. This isn't to say that I don't advise them that that is not the relationship they should be in, but I'm a lot more empathetic in terms of the tone I take when advising someone how to pick up the pieces after discovering their significant other has been unfaithful. Anyway, towards the end of my shift, I finally cracked and called her. As expected, Amy was in tears. She apologized profusely, said she wanted to get married and be my wife, and said she had a surprise for me when she got off work. I took the bait. She came over later that night and brought me a cupcake with a birthday candle in it and gave me a card and a really nice watch I wanted. But the birthday surprises weren't over. Amy turns around, lifts up her shirt, and unveils a tattoo of my name emblazoned in fresh red and black ink on the small of her back. I was back in her clutches. Unfortunately, the damage had been done. Our relationship was never the same after that and was a far cry from what it ever was during that magical spring of 2009. I was always checking up on her, asking her who she was calling or texting, basically all the behaviors I now teach men not to engage in. As you can probably imagine, that got old with Amy very quickly. We got into some pretty crazy knockdown, drag-out shouting matches, and they happened on a regular basis. It seemed like every other day we were screaming at each other for some reason or another. I found out that she had been cheating on me throughout our relationship and that she had been doing a very bad substance that started with the letter H all summer long. I mean, this was a bad situation. But despite all of that, I was still hopelessly in love with her. And even though things were terrible between us, I still held out hope that we could get through it and recapture the magic we had back in the spring. As if all this weren't bad enough, just over a month after my birthday, her ex-boyfriend was due to get out of prison, and you won't believe what happens next. So tune in next week for the conclusion of the worst heartbreak of my life. Thanks for watching.